Okay. Welcome to a Tuesday, I believe, here in June. We are now joined by the birthday boy. I know it was yesterday, but it's my good friend Chris Graham with the Augusta Free Press. Chris, how you doing today, buddy?
Well, I believe, according to a text from my friend Mark Moses, in 32 years, I'll be eligible to run for president. I'll be 80 years old by then. So, maybe I'll be mature enough by that stage. Yeah, otherwise, doing well.
Okay, I made that joke because my brother is turning 35 this fall. And, in normal times, you'd be like, oh, you're old enough and eligible to run for president now. No. Now you have to be, this has nothing to do with whoever the candidate is or your religious belief or your political belief. Both candidates are in their 70s. So you got some time, Chris, before you can run for president.
I got a whole lifetime ahead of me before I can run for president. Yeah, I'm ready.
That's what you're going to do. So did you have a nice birthday?
Yeah, a nice quiet birthday. There's still not much you can do. Normally on a birthday week for me, we're up in DC watching a Nats game. It's been like the last 4 or 5 years. I think we've been up there for a Nats weekend or something like that. So, other than not being able to watch baseball, I'm learning to love NASCAR and golf and Premier League soccer. Otherwise it was great.
I know we're going to get baseball now. It's still confusing what's going. So it's funny. Last time we get the news, they reject the offer from Major League Baseball, but then we're going to have baseball. Is that the best way to put it?
I think it is. And under the same terms, basically, one difference will be, I guess the agreement that the owners had proposed was it would have included a DH in the National League next season and expanded playoffs next season. And we only get DH in the National League this season and expanded playoffs this season. So this season won't be affected by the failure of the Players Association to ratify that particular deal. But otherwise, we get a 60-game season, and it'll be a quick sprint to the finish.
I'm still confused. All right, here's what we also know. They're not coming to their spring training facilities. I believe they're just going to train at their home fields. They're going to do that. So they're going to do that for a couple weeks, and then 60-game season. I'm telling you, you and me have had this discussion before. 35 games might win the division, maybe. We don't even know. And look, you're going right into the dog days of summer, which has never happened in baseball before. Never. Usually start in April. It's cold out. Pitchers are better than hitters. We have no idea. Are there going to be spring training games? Are they just going to practice? What's going to happen here?
Well, if you're training in your own facility, unless now they do have an expanded roster. The playing roster will be 30 instead of 26, and you have your full 40-man roster, as it's called, available to you. So that because there's no minor leagues this year, so your guys will be close there in case you need them from injury standpoint, anything like that. Maybe you can bring some guys in from an extended spring training kind of aspect to play intra-squad games. You want your pitchers to build their arm strength up. And, there's only so much you can do in a simulated game to do that. So there will be a need in some way for the pitchers, if nothing else. The hitters can go out there. They want to see some live pitching. But, the hitters can be out there and ready in a few days. The pitchers need, a good 3 weeks to get ready for the start of the season.
When you look back at the last couple of months, isn't it disappointing where it's like, why don't you just figure this out back in March with the original agreement? It's so frustrating as a fan, Chris.
Yeah, because that original agreement you were referencing, March 26th, laid out prorated salaries once the season was to pick up. I guess the issue there was that the owners decided, hey, even though they knew on March 26th that at least a portion of the season, if not the entirety of the regular season, would be played without fans or at least a limited number of fans in attendance. They looked at that prorated salary thing and said, well, we're not going to have any money from ticket sales, any money from concessions. And so maybe we shouldn't have agreed to prorated salaries back on March 26th. And they jumped back from that. We want to play more games at a less than prorated salary. And the players said, no, we made an agreement. And, so in the end, neither side looks good in this. At least when the games start here in about a month, at least we'll have baseball. And that's really all we can ask for at this stage.
I feel like I need to go old school and go to an actual bookstore. And there needs to be a special edition like season preview for me, where I know what players are on what team. How is this going to work with divisions? Don't you feel that way as well, where you have no idea what's going to happen?
Yeah, because I think what I remember from this, because the details are like a month old now. This is how long this has been playing out in the press. But they're going to align geographically. I assume that's the way they're going to do this, so that East teams play East teams, whatever league they're in, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and then, you start thinking about things too, like a 60-game schedule. Most teams go 5-man rotation. So, that means I'm a Nats fan. From Strasburg and Scherzer get roughly 12, 13 starts this season. They normally get 33, 34, 35, depending. And what strength level are your top starting pitchers at the beginning of the season? You mentioned in a normal season, April, they're stronger because the weather's cooler. Now it's mid-July. They haven't. I will assume, especially with your top line starting pitchers, the Garrett Coles and the Strasburgs and the Scherzers, those guys making $35 million a year, even prorated, that you're going to make sure they're 100% ready to go. You're not going to throw them out there and have them snap a slider and have to get Tommy John surgery. But it's a sprint. I mean, last year's World Series winners, my Nats, were 19-31 after 50 games. We're playing 60 games this year. There's no chance to come out of the gate and have a long losing streak. You have a long losing. The first 2 weeks of the season, if you're 2-10, you're done.
You bring up the pitching. I wonder if, let's say Max Scherzer is like really hot. Maybe you pitch him every 3 games, maybe 4. Who knows? Maybe what I'm trying to say is maybe you go to a 4-man rotation instead of 5. Maybe you could pull that off.
You very well could. And plus the schedule, from what I've seen, it's built in 60 games with 10 off days in between, a total in between. So 60 games in 70 days. I mean, yeah, you could. Your 5th starter can certainly be a spot starter. So maybe you do squeeze a couple extra starts out of your top line guys, your 1, 2s, and 3s. Maybe your 4 kind of stays on track, and then your 5. If you skip your 5, he's a long reliever. For a week. So there's a chance to do that and maybe get 15 starts instead of 12 out of your top guys.
Okay, wait a minute. What? Now I'm confused because there's so many questions. And we're here with Chris Graham, Augusta Free Press. We're talking baseball. They're going to play, right? They are. This is going to happen. I'm sorry to the baseball players out there. They're going to play this summer. What did you say the rosters were now expanded to?
30-man roster. Now, they were already going to expand from 25 to 26. That was already built in before the season. Players Association got to 30 more jobs out of the owners this year. So they were already going 25, 26. Now they're going to 30, and also there's something called the 40-man roster, and that's the number of players, including your major league roster. The other 14 or 15 were the guys you protected from being drafted away from you in what they call a Rule 5 draft. So going way into weeds there to say your 40-man roster, usually 15 of those guys were in the minor leagues, in AA or AAA, wherever they were. Well, now those other guys on your 40-man roster will be in the major league city. They'll be available if you have an injury issue. Now there's the 7-day DL. There used to be a 15-game DL. Now you have a 7 and 10-day DL. So if you had to put a guy on the disabled list really quickly, your 40-man roster, you can't call them up from the minor leagues because there's not going to be a minor leagues this year. So you have those guys available to just plug right into your roster. So I mean, effectively, you got your 40-man roster, you got a 30-man active roster. That's the guys you can use that night. The guys who are on the 30-man can be used pinch hitter, relief pitcher, etc. And then you have your 40-man roster to be able to pull from with injuries.
Okay, strategy-wise, I can use my bullpen more because maybe I have more relievers. So, you never want to stress out that bullpen, which happens to every team during the dog days.
Yes.
Now I can. See, that'll be the strategy. Like, all right, you have the expanded roster. Do you have more hitters or would you put more pitchers in your roster? I put more pitching as much as I can. That's what I do.
With 25-man, which is what we played through to the end of last year, a lot of teams would go 13-man pitching staff. 5 starters, 8-man bullpen. Now, you got 30. You got 5 extra guys from what you played with last year. What benefit is it to have? You could put in a 1 or 2 extra bats on the end of your bench, but even so, you're going to definitely put at least 2 guys, maybe 3 of those extra 5 guys are going to be relief pitchers, more arms. That means prorated basis, even more money for left-handed 1-out guys, as they call them. Those guys who literally come in and get the 1 out. lefty-lefty matchups. They'll make even more money this year.
You know, it's also cool. You're going to get guys who've always been in AA or AAA and have never made the show, and they're going to play pro baseball. They're going to play Major League Baseball this summer. Isn't that cool? Like, it's going to happen.
It definitely is. A lot of guys will definitely, because that's 5 more jobs from the end of last year times 30 teams. That's 150 new jobs for the major leagues this year, paying jobs. And then that 40-man roster, again, there's going to be a lot of those guys who get in because of nagging injuries that pop up with this quick start to a season and then that sprint to the finish. There's going to be a bunch of guys who make their major league debuts this year and are going to be really relied upon. Everybody's in a pennant race. It's a 60-game season. Everybody's in contention right now.
No expanded playoffs, right? Is that?
I think it was no expanded playoffs for next year, I believe. I think this year they are. I mean, I'll go with it. They are expanding this year, not next year, though.
All right, so 60 games. You might have a wild card team win 25 games. It might happen.
Especially if we do the expanded playoffs, definitely. And like I said too. I mean, last year, baseball is that sport where you can have a team like the Baltimore Orioles, another one of my local teams here. They're awful. They won 50 games each of the last couple of years. They could easily this year. I mean, you don't have to be great for 162. You have to be great for a third of a normal major league season. 54 games will be a third of the season, so just over a third of the season. Anybody can get hot. And even then, even that said, you get one of your 25-win wild card teams in there, you could have a 25-win team win the World Series this year if that was the case.
It's like I have so many questions. It's like, and there's no wrong answers here because we don't know. We're going to find out. Is this going to help the youth or a veteran team? Who's going to be able to do this? Where they're going to be? Because we don't know yet what could happen. It's a question mark. If you're okay, you look at my White Sox. They're a young team. They've developed over the last 2 years. This is supposed to be the year where they break through, and they have a lot of young bats in this lineup. Are they going to be a positive? Like, is this, or are you going to look like a team like the Yankees or Astros where they're just going to dominate again? That's what we're going to find out. I mean, it's fascinating. All right.
I think the loaded teams like the Yankees and Astros, loaded teams talent-wise, are going to have the easier time because those kind of teams, and you look at the Yankees and Astros the last 3 or 4 seasons, they don't get off to slow starts. I think the key here is, the first 2-3 weeks of the season, your first 15, 20 games, you've got to get out the gate. If you are one of those teams, if you're the Nationals, whoever you are out there, you can't afford to be middling along. You can't be 5-10 after 15 games.
Oh.
If you're 5-10 after 15 games, you're already out because you've already played a fourth of your games there. So I think the veteran teams are going to have, to me, they will have the advantage because they know how to get it done. Really, honestly, by this time of the year, teams like Yankees and Astros and maybe Nats, because the Nats have been consistently good the last few years, those kind of teams already know, hey, it's mid-July, we're already thinking about October. This has been something for them for years. Hey, we're already shifting into postseason mode here. So whereas those young teams, mid-July, they've kind of already given up. Usually those seasons are over. They're thinking about next year in a different way. So I don't know. I like the favorite teams to maybe do better in this environment.
I think about American League and National League, but you're saying it's going to be regional with who you play. It kind of makes, I know this is blasphemy, it'd make more sense that, like, when you get to the playoffs, you just take on those teams from the East Coast or the West Coast. Forget AL versus NL. That's how but I know they're going to still make it like a normal World Series. As you can tell, I'm very excited about this. I'm ready, Chris. Are you?
I'm ready too. I mean, because baseball, even though the NFL's taken over as the number one most popular sport in America and has for the last 15 or 20 years, baseball, it's the rhythm of life in America. And it has been for over 100 years, 120 years or whatever, since the National League and American League started rivaling in the early 1900s. It's part of your daily tapestry. It's something you turn on SportsCenter at night, you get highlights of 15 games, back when we still read newspapers, you'd look at the box scores in the morning in the paper. It's something that's part of daily life, and it feels normal. So when baseball comes back, life will feel a little more normal than it has the last few months.
You know what I miss some days? When I was in college, especially, I would watch Baseball Tonight at 9 Eastern, every night. I'm not joking around. Like, that was a big deal. Now you have your phone where you could just see every highlight in 2 seconds, but I miss those days. Like, and essentially around the trade deadline, maybe like July 31st, you added a bat. That was big time for me. I love that, Chris. I hope you feel the same way.
I'm still lazy enough, I guess. You can find everything you want on your phone, certainly. But I'm at 11 o'clock. I turn on Sports Center, because they don't have baseball night anymore, or MLB Network, and I just watch the highlights because that way you don't have to actually look for them. They're just there. But the last few years, I've gotten the MLB Network package. I've watched one team primarily, the team I root for, the Nationals. But when their game's over, I'll flip a game on for an hour or so. And listen to the other announcers. Because I also doing the work in broadcasting, I want to hear how other guys do their job. So baseball's something for me. When baseball season's here, my poor wife loses me to baseball, and luckily for me, she's a big baseball fan too. But we know there's no binge watching during baseball season. We have to get our binge watching out of the way the next few weeks, because after July 24th, I think the date is, that's TV for me for the next several months.
Let's clarify something here. The Nationals are only about 15 years old, okay? Because they started in 2005. They're 15 years old. Them winning the World Series has now cemented Chris as, this is my team, right? This has finally happened for you?
Oh, no, they've been my team since the first year they were there. You got to remember now. So, Mark, your listeners, your viewers out there, they know you in Florida. You worked in Charlottesville for a few years. Ryan Zimmerman was the first UVA baseball player drafted out of the current UVA baseball coach, Brian O'Connor's class of kids. Ryan Zimmerman was a number 4 draft pick of the Nats. He was the first draft pick of the Nats, number 4 overall in 2005. And hey, our UVA baseball's in resurgence. Ryan Zimmerman is the first draft pick of this franchise. He played in the minor leagues for like 3 weeks, went to the Nats, and never went back to the minor leagues. So we went and watched a lot of really bad baseball. We would go up there. Levon Hernandez was the opening day starter. I mean, there were some awful teams. When you suffer with a team, as long as we suffered with that team, that is your team before they won the World Series. Winning the World Series is the cherry on top.
Okay, I know the history. So they played at RFK originally. I remember when they got Alfonso Soriano. Was that for like a year?
I think he had 46 home runs hitting down that left field line, which is about 280 feet. And then he made a huge amount of money. I think the Texas Rangers signed him and realized all they could do is hit 280-foot fly balls. So, yeah.
He gets kind of lost in the history of baseball. Like, he was a good player, especially on the Yankees and everything. And then I remember in 2011 when the Nats won 10 in a row and Jim Riggleman went into the front office and said, I want a contract extension. And they said no, so he quit.
At the All-Star break, yeah.
Yes. 10-game winning streak and then quit. That happened. That was insane. See, they used to, in Melbourne, that used to be the spring training home for the Nationals. And it was even when they were the Expos. It used to be the Marlins, then they left. Then it became the Expos, the Nationals, and now the Nats went down to West Palm Beach. You had that. So it's an interesting history here in Brevard County with the Nationals.
Well, and for us too, so the history with the Expos you mentioned, for several years leading up to 2005, there was talk that the Expos were going to become the Washington Nationals. And, when teams leave spring training and start flying to their first game sites for the regular season, they'll often play a exhibition game on their way to wherever they're going. And for several years, I want to say the first year I remember this was 1998. Or 1999, I'm sorry. The Expos would play a game in RFK against whoever they were going to get ready to play in the regular season. I remember Mark McGwire and the Cardinals were the 1999 game. So we would go every year. I mean, hey, we can't wait. These guys are going to be the Nationals. So that date's even further back than 2005. I remember 1999 watching an exhibition game with Mark McGwire hitting a single in 3 at-bats on an exhibition game against the Expos.
Did you see the Griffey documentary? Because I watched it. Did you?
I have not yet. No, it's definitely on the list. And I haven't seen the I saw your Twitter commentary on the home run chase ESPN 30 for 30. I gather from you, I haven't watched it yet, but I gather from your commentary that they sort of skirted over the steroids part.
What they tried to do was just show that summer. Not see, I want like a 5-part series on the whole steroid era. I want to see all of it because it happened. It's part of my youth. I went through this. Like
Yeah.
I always say, all those guys were my guys growing up. Like you talk to a baby boomer and they'll say, oh, maybe I saw Ted Williams, I saw Joe DiMaggio, I saw all these great players. But then I'm like, well, I grew up with Sosa, McGuire, Bonds, Griffey, Frank Thomas, Gary Sheffield. Those are my guys. So I loved the summer of '98. It was fun every day. And especially being in Illinois, we had the two teams like going at each other. I loved it. But then I don't know. They just act like the steroid era never happened. Like it was like 94 strike to the Red Sox winning in 04. Like nothing happened in between that. But
what's your hot take here? What's your take on should Bonds and Clemens be in the Hall? Have you come out on that issue?
Okay, I go back and forth. My official comment now is they should have a special wing saying this is like the steroid era. It should say that. Like, okay. And it should say, here's the accomplishments they did on their plaque. They also took this, but ... everyone in America loved it. Don't act like like when Bonds was hitting 73 homers, no one's like, oh, this is terrible. Everyone loved it, Chris. And 98, you saw it. Everyone loved McGuire and Sosa. So we're as guilty as they are when I think about it.
Well, we are, and then I think they're both – those guys are Hall of Famers. Sosa I would kind of put on the other side of the line, certainly. But those guys were great players before steroids, and also – I think we tweeted back and forth about Lance Armstrong too. I did get to watch that two-parter. Steroids don't make you hit home runs. If you and I take steroids, we're not going to go hit home runs because we still lack the skill to do anything with the steroids. Those guys were great players, and so many people were cheating in that era. And it's so if everybody's cheating, or most everybody's cheating, and you're the best cheaters. You're the best of that era, so you should be in the Hall of Fame. And you start looking back, I mean, you can start making arguments, gosh, the players from the 30s and 40s didn't play against African Americans, and, they didn't have to fly across country to play, games play in New York one night and LA the next night. And, of course, those guys will say, but you didn't have to take trains everywhere. So every era has its own idiosyncrasies. I think the Hall of Fame should be about who's the best players of each individual era. Those two guys were the best players, among the best players of that era. So as a result, they're Hall of Famers.
Well, are they the biggest jerks of the era? Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
With Bonds and Clemens, yeah. But, okay, the thing with Griffey is, and I started the show with this yesterday, can I go to the alternate universe where he takes steroids and then hits 900 homers? Can I see that? Please?
That's the amazing thing about Griffey is that he was just such a natural in that era. And he had 50-plus home run seasons in that era too. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. Well, wait, let's see what he would have done. You would have had to put a net up in front of the pitcher though to protect the pitchers, just in case.
So it's like him and like Frank Thomas are the two hitters that did not take steroids. And what's funny with those two is, especially Griffey, remember, he signs with Cincinnati. He's like 30, 31 years old. Then he's injured every single year.
Yeah.
If he takes steroids, does he recover quicker and he doesn't get injured as much? I mean, these are all questions to ask. Like, because remember, so from like 18-19 to 30-31, for like 11 years, this guy's the best baseball player on the planet, right? Then he goes to Cincinnati and it derails. He hits another like 250 homers. But the what if he stays in Seattle his whole career? And what if he doesn't get injured? He'd own every single record. But it's funny, he doesn't take steroids and he's still at 600 homers. But I say this all the time. He's not as famous as those other guys. It's very weird in my eye. Like, everyone knows he's great, but Bonds and McGuire and Sosa are more famous to casual fans. That's how I look at it.
You're right, because I'm thinking back in the '90s because you were. I'm just a few years older than you, but in the '90s, everybody was wearing backwards hats like Ken Griffey Jr. In that moment, he was more famous. But then, he got eclipsed because he didn't break home run records like McGuire and then Bonds and then Bonds with all the MVPs and Clemens with all the Cy Youngs. Griffey was just like he was the third guy of that group, I guess you could say. But those guys, they changed the game, and he was a great player who never quite eclipsed that. And yeah, I mean, if not for steroids, Clemens' career's cut shorter, and he's in the Hall of Fame already. And Bonds would have still been a 40 home run guy. His head wouldn't have been size 8.5 by the end of his career. But he'd be in the Hall of Fame. And Griffey of the three would be the one of the three that would be looked at as maybe the greatest player of all time.
The other knock on Griffey, and I love Griffey. He wasn't a winner. Like, he reminds me of Mike Trout now, where it's like, okay, he had the 95 season, which is amazing, where they come back, catch Los Angeles and win the division. He did not have many winning seasons. That's my other knock on him. I have to say that. And
baseball is a sport where it's hard. Like Mike Trout is looked at as regarded universally as the greatest player in baseball right now, and one of the greatest of all time. He's not won a series in the playoffs yet. He's not even won a wild card round series yet. So baseball's weird like that. You only get to bat once every 9 times through. Maybe 3 or 4 bats in a game. The season's 162 games. So many things can happen. He had the fortune to play on some good Mariners teams that just didn't get quite far enough. And whereas in basketball, if you're Michael Jordan, there's no rule that all 5 guys have to shoot it before you can shoot it again. You can go out there and dominate the game the way you need to dominate. Baseball's a sport that it doesn't reward its greatest stars necessarily the way other sports do.
Okay, here's the hypothetical. Would you rather have Derek Jeter's career or Ken Griffey Jr.'s career? Both in the Hall of Fame.
Jeter's all the way because he won all the championships. For all the knocks we give him now for being a shortstop who shouldn't have been a shortstop, defensively he was challenged, that kind of thing. He was the shortstop for 5 World Series champions with the New York Yankees. You take Jeter every time you can.
And remember, Griffey is considered one of the greatest players of all time, maybe top 25, 600 homers, first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, you think like, all right, I'm going to build a baseball player. This guy played center field, 10-time Gold Glover, right? You don't even want to hit the ball at him.
Right.
Then he can hit 50 homers, bat 300. He's the perfect baseball player. And you said I'd rather be Derek Jeter.
Oh, choosing the career, yes.
Okay.
Being the guy, I would be Ken Griffey Jr. had a smile on his face every second of every day. Now, that said, Derek Jeter used to give out the fruit baskets after things happen. So, there is that aspect too. So, you take being the shortstop on 5 World Series champions in New York for the storied Yankees, and I'm saying 5. I think it's 5. I'll have to go back and count it.
No, it's 5.
It's 5. Okay. You take being the shortstop is the quarterback of the team for the team of all teams in American sports, Yankees and I guess Dallas Cowboys. So you take that and run with it anytime you get a chance.
It's a great hypothetical because there is no wrong answer. There isn't. Okay. Notice I didn't say Alex Rodriguez because I don't want that career.
No, you run from that career.
I was telling to my dad on Father's Day where I remember where I was at when it said Texas Rangers $252 million for Alex Rodriguez. That was 20 years ago. That was so shocking. Now, when you think about it, Mike Trout signed for what, $430 million? Mm-hmm. Like, man, oh man, that's why when I look at baseball players and they're complaining about salaries and the CBA, I'm like, are you kidding me? Those guys get the most money of any sport in this country, and they're still complaining.
Well, now, but you're looking at the top guys, and for all the top guys, there's 10 guys who aren't top guys, and so I know that the guys who you see quoted in stories are the guys like the Scherzers and Strasburgs and Trouts who make 30, 35, $40 million a year, but the league minimum's $500,000, I think, and even when you hear that, you say, great, $500,000.
Yeah, I'll take $500,000,
and you get to do it for a year or two. And then you got to live the rest of your life, and it's tough. I mean, it's not a guarantee that and it's a prorated $500,000 now. It'd be more like $150,000, $160,000, and you've worked all your life to get to this stage, and then you get to do it for maybe a year or two. There's a lot more guys like that than there are those stars. We focus on the stars. There's a lot more guys at the foundation that this is critical for them. The minor league players who aren't getting paid, this is a critical year for them.
Okay, here's the fantasy. So I'm like utility hitter in the big leagues for like about 7 years, and then I save all my money, and then I don't want to be on the play-by-play every day. I don't want that as the fantasy. Maybe, but I don't know. I want to be like the studio analysts on ESPN, where they just come to me, right? Like kind of like how Barry Melrose is for hockey, where they just bring him out every couple weeks. I'll just do that job and you pay me. All right? Is that cool? Let's do that.
I would be a relief pitcher because because a hitter, I think I'd be better at trying to get guys out than trying to hit a ball, because a 90-mile-an-hour slider coming at me, there's no chance. I have no chance at that. But yeah, let me be a relief pitcher for those 7 years you're talking about. I actually would like to be the color commentator for the team. I wouldn't mind traveling. They get days off in between. They get weeks off, whatever.
It's every day. Remember, like when you do VMI baseball for ESPN3, how many games are usually in a season?
We do 18. I do 6 weekend series.
That's a lot. I know it's a lot on you.
Oh, it is. By Sunday, I'm exhausted. Yeah. Now the difference with that is, though, I'm also working my day job and then going and doing those games at night. And that's on my weekends when I would normally have off. Having the touch with that experience, I probably wouldn't do it for 20 years, but a year or 2 or 3, and plus half those games are at home. So. And those guys get treated. Okay. I mean, if they get treated commensurately better at the big league level compared to what I get treated at the VMI level, ESPN3 level, they get treated well, because at the ESPN3 level, we get treated great. So I can only imagine what life's like for those guys.
I like it. Let's end with this. We're here with Chris Graham-Augusta Free Press. We just rattled off for 30 straight minutes. We just did. We just started talking. All right. Yesterday was your birthday. Happy birthday. And The Undertaker said he's retiring, right? Which I don't believe. No, it's just like a rapper, like when Jay-Z said, "Oh, I'm retiring," and then he kept going for another 10 years. I am putting The Undertaker on my Mount Rushmore. For my wrestling Mount Rushmore, this is very controversial. Here are the 4 I'm putting on there: Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Vince McMahon, and The Undertaker. I say The Undertaker. Remember, I could have put Stone Cold. I could have put The Rock. There's all these other people, Macho Man Randy Savage. But I feel like The Undertaker, 30 years with the WWE. Consistency. Never went to TNA. Never went to WCW. 30 years, same gimmick. Right? He spanned multiple generations and eras. I know you were talking baseball, the eras, where attitude era, aggression era, whatever that's, ruthless aggression, right? He was there with Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair in the early 90s. He was there when Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart were the big guys. He's been the one consistent, right? The other thing with him is he's never embarrassed himself. There's never been a controversy. This is what I like about him. Also, and I know you have like 400 comments to say now. The other thing is, we know him because of the streak. The streak mattered in professional wrestling. The streak. And he created the Hell in the Cell. Those are his. When you think of The Rock or Stone, what have they done legacy-wise like that? And I love those guys, but I'm going with Undertaker. Do you at least respect that I'm putting The Undertaker in the Mount Rushmore?
I respect it, yeah. And the things you mentioned there, when you talk about The Rock, of course, The Rock went on to greater fame as an actor, and he's been a part-timer at best the last 15 years. Stone Cold had the injury 2003, I think it was, yeah. And smartly for him, I'm proud of him that he figured out a post-wrestling career. It's mostly in wrestling still as a podcaster and around the business, but he's not come back. He's not been tempted to come back, given that he had that serious injury. A lot of guys, Edge, we just saw recently come back from a very similar serious injury. I'm glad for Edge, but I'm also a little sad that, that he couldn't resist the temptation. Undertaker, yeah, spans the eras, and he took his lumps early in his career. Mark Calloway, he played Division II basketball, college basketball. That's something that a lot of folks don't know, but now that you think about it, he's a big, tall guy. He had an early run in the Indies, and then in the old World Championship Wrestling, NWA, not used very well. The Undertaker at first was a very, to me, cheesy gimmick. I'll be honest, when I first saw it the first couple of years, this is awful. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And of all those gimmicks from the late 80s, that worked. And now WWE almost screwed up Undertaker. I think it was WrestleMania 9. They actually had him booked to lose and then changed last minute and had him win. There would have been no streak. And it was like a jobber kind of thing. It was like, I can't even think of who the guy was he was going to lose to. The streak is iconic. And his ability to come back once a year the last 5 or 6 years. He only wrestles 1 or 2 matches a year. For him to come back and put on the shows he does, he's 55 years old now. I actually do believe he's probably done, Mark. I think this is it for him.
And I told you this a couple weeks ago. He's like Tim Duncan. That's his legacy. He's not flashy. He's not going to get all the headlines. This guy's been efficient, and he's a winner. And I don't – the other thing is, I never hear anyone say anything bad about him. And look, maybe these had some arguments to people. Always a class act. Like, that's why he's like the Tim Duncan of wrestling.
He's always talked about as a locker room leader, as the guy that sort of mediated disputes. If anybody had a problem, they went to him, and he'd figure it out. He'd get everybody to agree. And he's the one guy that Vince McMahon couldn't ever push away or talk down to. I mean, even Vince McMahon reputedly was someone that held him in that high esteem. So, and as for your choices on your Mount Rushmore, you only get 4, obviously, and 3 of those are solid. Vince McMahon, certainly, from the promoter standpoint, Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, just because they were the business for 20 plus years. Undertaker, if you're kind of stacking it towards 80s to now, definitely. You go back a little further, maybe you throw names in like Bruno Sammartino or Lou Thesz, guys who had longevity back in the 50s and 60s. But from 80s on, I don't think there's any question Undertaker is your guy, because whether he was in the main event of all those WrestleManias, he was the match you wanted to see on those WrestleManias. And so for him to carry as many of the biggest show of the year every year, for him to carry as many of those as he did, he's got to be one of your top guys.
Calling Shawn Michaels Mr. WrestleMania is stupid. I'm sorry I have to use that terminology. I know I'm college educated, but it's stupid. Undertaker is Mr. WrestleMania. So we'll end with this. Looking back now, was it the right move in hindsight to let Brock Lesnar beat The Undertaker to finish the streak?
I didn't think even then. I mean, it was a nice shock. I mean, if you're looking for headlines, but no, I mean, to me, I always said, because it had to end at some point, it needed to be given to a guy that could take it and run with it. Like, it would elevate that person. He even lost, I'm not sure if it was the next year, sometime after that, he lost to Roman Reigns. If you're going to have him lose to Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, Roman Reigns should have been the first guy. Roman Reigns needed that rub from Undertaker. Brock Lesnar didn't need anything. Brock Lesnar was a 2-time UFC heavyweight champion, the former NCAA champion. He'd already been a WWE champion several times. It didn't make any sense. I mean, that's waste. The most valuable thing in all of wrestling history was Undertaker's streak. They could have given it to CM Punk, the year when, I think it was 20-0 or maybe 21-0. They could have ended it there and given it to CM Punk. Of course, now maybe there's a reason they didn't give it to CM Punk. But, give it to somebody who could take it and run with it. Brock Lesnar didn't need that. That just didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and now Brock Lesnar loses to Seth Rollins every year at Mania. So what are you doing? Hey, I actually watched Raw last night for you. I did. I watched it, and you didn't miss anything. They had 3 title fights, and the champs won every single one of them. So what are you doing? Why are you hyping that you're having championship matches?
I will say it feels like the shows are better structured to me the last couple of weeks. And I know in part that may be, there was the famous change. Paul Heyman no longer, at least in name, in charge of the shows. Bruce Pritchard's now in charge of the shows. I think it may be coincidence, but I have felt like, yeah, there was no title changes, or anything else, but it feels like to me they're putting on actually a better shows, more cleaner shows the last couple of weeks. So I'm hopeful because there for a while it was unwatchable.
I think the Street Profits, who I've seen live at NXT, I think they have star quality because there's no fans in the stands and they took over the whole TV screen where they're coming out and they won last night. I think they have potential here.
Hey, them and Viking Raiders, as silly as it might be at times, it's compelling. I'm interested in it. So keep them together for a while. That's kind of like a new version of Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express. I'm gonna get struck by lightning for saying that out loud, but these guys can work together for a while and it won't get boring. And that's a quality that's important. And maybe they can bring tag team wrestling back in WWE because they're certainly getting a push right now.
It's kind of like they really try to push the Usos, right, as a tag team. But I think the Street Profits have more of the it factor. I just see it. They bring the sauce. What do they say? They bring the sauce, or is it the fire? What do they say? I got to look it up.
They bring the sauce, and they are great workers. The Usos are legacy guys, but they're okay workers. These guys can work, and they can talk. That Viking Raiders team is interesting. They don't look like anything. They're just two fat, hairy guys, but they can work their butts off. And as a result, they just work. They're a great match together.
I get confused with Heavy Machinery and Viking Raiders. I think they're the same tag team, but they're not. I get this. One's with Mandy Rose, right? Isn't that the difference?
Well, and that's Otis, our boy Otis, who's now the Money in the Bank guy of all things. I just can't believe that. But he's right now he's hot, and he can work too. He's an actual former. I don't think he was an NCAA champion, but he was an NCAA champion contender. You don't look at that Otis guy and think anything other than he ate donuts all of his life. He was actually a top flight amateur wrestler, and he's got the gimmick part of it down. So that's the combination that you look for if you're Vince McMahon, a guy who can actually work in the ring, and also he can figure out how to talk. Put him with Mandy Rose. Of course, you put anybody with Mandy Rose, right? So
I'll just tell you. So we go to NXT tapings when the Street Profits were there. There was this one like tall nerdy guy who'd be in the front row at every taping. I could point out, if we look at an old video, he goes to every taping. Like, they always talk about the little Bailey girl. I know she's always Bailey's number one fan. This dude, he's like really tall, like 6'5", nerdy, and I mean just like he had glasses, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I know you have glasses on. I have them as well. He would, every time the Street Profits would show up, he'd take out the sign and it'd say, like, I love the Street Profits. And, like, the Street Profits, what they would do is they would go into the stands, like, kind of go up the ramp at the back, and they'd start partying with all the fans. This dude would run all the way up there to get his sign. Do you know who I'm talking about? He's in every one.
I remember seeing the guy in the as soon as you said guy in the front row, I knew what you were talking about because
yes,
because when you watch a month of NXT, at least back then, you watched a month of NXT, you saw everybody because you were there sometime. Hey, there's Mark again.
I know.
You're there for a week. So I remember the guy. Definitely.
When we get back to normal, you are flying down here, and we're going to go to a taping. We are going to go, and you're going to be at the entrance ramp where I sit. It's the greatest thing ever. You have to do it.
I'll be noticeable, the bald head, so it'll help me stand out there too. And maybe I'll bring a sign. I love Street Profits.
No, it'll say Team of Destiny now on sale on Amazon. That's what it'll say.
We'll go for it. I'll take you up on that.
Chris Graham, Augusta Free Press. Chris, thanks for your help, man. I'll see you around, okay?
Thanks, Mark.